Think you could survive life in a royal palace? Think again. To the outside world, the Ottoman Sultan's palace looked like a place of endless wealth and luxury. But for a male concubine inside its walls, it was closer to a prison. The moment you entered, you lost everything. Your freedom, your identity, even your very name. From then on, you weren't a man with a past or a future. You were property of the empire, living only to serve the will of others. The price of entry was unthinkable. Most male concubines were castrated before ever setting foot in the palace, ensuring absolute control and severing them permanently from the life they once knew. The pain was unbearable, but worse still was the knowledge that your fate was no longer your own. And every single day brought new dangers. A careless word, a wrong look, even the slightest hint of disobedience could mean brutal punishment, sometimes even death. The palace was not a sanctuary, but a gilded cage, and survival meant obedience, silence, and fear. Could you endure that for even a day? The truth is, most wouldn't last a single one, and here's why. Before we dive in, just a quick ask. These videos take a lot of time, research, and care to create. If you're enjoying the journey through these forgotten corners of history, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. It doesn't cost you anything, but it means everything to the channel and helps keep these stories alive. Thank you so much. So, what exactly made life as an Ottoman male concubine so unbearable? To understand, we need to look inside the palace, behind the golden gates, past the lavish walls, and into the shadows where the truth was hidden. What I'm about to share are 8 reasons why most people today, maybe even you, wouldn't last a single day in their place. We'll start at number 8 with the hardships that seem shocking, but survivable, and work our way down to number 1, the most disturbing, horrifying reality of all. Each step will take us deeper into the world of the Sultan's concubines, where survival wasn't about strength, but silence, obedience, and sacrifice. Remember, this wasn't just life in the palace. For many of these men, it was a slow death of everything they once were. So let's begin. The palace was a prison. Imagine stepping into the Sultan's palace for the very first time. At first glance, it looks breathtaking. Towering walls, golden domes, and endless marble courtyards. But once the gates shut behind you, that beauty becomes a prison. You weren't free to wander the city streets, visit family, or live as you pleased. From that moment on, every step you took, every word you spoke, even the way you looked at someone, was controlled. The palace walls didn't just keep outsiders away, they trapped you inside. For an Ottoman male concubine, freedom was gone the second you entered. You couldn't stroll into the markets of Istanbul. You couldn't walk along the Bosporus. You couldn't even choose when to rest or eat. Guards watched constantly, and rules governed even the smallest actions. The palace became both your home and your cage. Some men compared it to being buried alive. You could still breathe, still move, still see the sunlight shining on the domes above you. But your life wasn't your own anymore. You existed only within those walls, and you would likely die within them too. To the outside world, the Sultan's palace was a symbol of wealth and power. But for those inside, it was confinement disguised as luxury. And no matter how beautiful it appeared, you could never forget the truth. This wasn't a palace of freedom. It was a prison, and you were its prisoner. Hierarchy and cruelty. Life inside the Sultan's palace wasn't just about serving the empire. It was about surviving the daily cruelty of those above you. The harem was run by a strict hierarchy, and every eunuch had a place within it. At the very bottom were the newcomers, frightened, uncertain, and powerless. At the top stood the older, more experienced eunuchs who had learned to play the game of power. And make no mistake, they ruled over the younger ones with an iron fist. Obedience wasn't optional. If you hesitated, if you failed to follow orders, or if you simply crossed the wrong person, the punishment was swift. Beatings were common, sometimes with sticks, sometimes with bare hands. Humiliation was even worse. designed to strip away any sense of pride you might still carry. Starvation could be used as a tool of control, withholding food until you broke down into submission. Even small mistakes could spiral into days of suffering. What made this system so brutal was that cruelty didn't always come from the Sultan or the guards. It often came from your fellow eunuchs. Older ones, desperate to maintain their fragile status, made sure to remind younger ones of their place. To them, you were competition, and keeping you beaten down was a way of survival. Inside these walls, you were never truly safe. You couldn't relax, you couldn't trust, and you certainly couldn't show weakness. Every day was a test of obedience, and one wrong move could turn you into a target. In a world where cruelty was normal, mercy was rare, and survival meant enduring humiliation again and again. Endless service, zero freedom. From the moment you woke up until the moment you collapsed at night, your life belonged entirely to the Sultan's household. There was no such thing as free time, no personal space, no private thoughts that truly belonged to you. Every task, every movement, every breath of your day was dictated by duty. You weren't living your own life. You were living the life the palace demanded of you. Your responsibilities stretched far beyond what most people today could imagine. You served as guardians of the harem, enforcing strict discipline to ensure no outsider could ever threaten the Sultan's women. You worked as messengers, cleaners, attendants, and guards, often all at once. If the palace needed something, it was your job to provide it. If the harem demanded order, it was your role to keep it. Even the smallest act of defiance, like pausing too long or looking distracted, could be punished. There was no rest from these duties. Even at night, you were on call, ready to respond at a moment's notice. Privacy didn't exist. Your every movement was monitored by those above you. The idea of free will simply vanished the moment you entered the harem. And what made this worse was the knowledge that it would never end. This wasn't a temporary role or a short punishment. It was your entire existence. Day after day, year after year, you served without pause, without choice, and without freedom. For the eunuchs of the Ottoman palace, service wasn't just a job, it was a life sentence. Isolation from the outside world. Imagine being taken from your home, never to return. The moment you entered the Sultan's palace, your old life was erased. Family, friends, the streets you grew up on, even the language and customs you once knew, all of it became a memory that you could never touch again. For many concubines, this separation was the deepest wound of all. The palace wasn't just a prison made of stone walls and locked gates. It was a prison of the heart and mind. Letters, visits, even word from the outside world. These things didn't exist. Once inside, you were cut off completely. The Sultan's household became your entire universe, whether you wanted it or not. Think about that level of loneliness. You might spend decades serving in the harem, yet never hear your mother's voice again. Never see your siblings grow up. Never know what happened to your village. The silence of that absence was constant, gnawing at you every day. This isolation wasn't accidental. It was intentional. The less connection you had to the outside world, the more dependent you became on the palace. You were reshaped into a tool of the empire, loyal only to the Sultan because you had nowhere else left to turn. For most modern people, losing access to family or friends for even a few weeks is hard. Now imagine that lasting a lifetime. No freedom, no visits, no way back. Just the endless reminder that your past was gone forever and your future belonged to the palace alone. Total loss of identity. One of the most devastating realities of life as an Ottoman male concubine was the erasure of who you once were. The moment you entered the palace, your old life, your name, your history, your family was stripped away. You were given a new identity, not to honor you, but to remind you that your past was dead. Whatever boy you once were ceased to exist. Names carry power. They carry memories of home, parents, friendships, in the life you lived before captivity. But inside the palace, your name wasn't yours anymore. You answered only to the title assigned to you, a label that tied you permanently to the Sultan's household. With every passing day, it was as if your old self faded further into the shadows, until even you might begin to forget who you once were. This wasn't just a change on paper, it was psychological warfare. By erasing your former identity, the system broke you down, reshaping you into someone loyal only to the palace. You were no longer a son, a brother, or a friend. You were property, and imagine what that does to the human spirit. To live every day knowing the person you were born as no longer exists, that the world outside might never even speak your name again. It was a slow death of the self. Not a physical death, but one far more haunting. For most people today, the loss of identity is unthinkable. But for the concubines, it was the reality of survival. You didn't belong to yourself anymore. You belonged to the empire. Psychological toll. Perhaps the most haunting reality of life as an Ottoman male concubine wasn't the physical suffering, but the slow destruction of the mind. Over time, the endless weight of confinement, servitude, and fear broke men from the inside. Their bodies might have survived, but their spirits often didn't. Imagine waking every day knowing you had no freedom, no family, and no future. Your name, your identity, your very sense of self had been stripped away. You weren't living your own life anymore. You were living a life forced upon you, one that belonged entirely to the Sultan's palace. That knowledge alone could crush even the strongest will. Fear was constant. A single mistake, a glance in the wrong direction, a word spoken too boldly, could mean punishment or execution. That looming threat meant you could never truly rest, never feel safe. It wasn't just your body under control. Your thoughts, your emotions, even your hopes had to be contained. This kind of pressure created a psychological cage as real as the palace walls. Some concubines endured, but many were hollowed out, losing the will to resist or even to imagine a life beyond the harem. Survival became mechanical. Eat when told, serve when ordered, obey without question. In the end, the greatest torment wasn't always the beatings or the isolation, but the quiet collapse of the human spirit. To live without freedom, without identity, without hope, that was a kind of death that came long before the body's end. Constant fear of execution. If there was one thing that haunted every male concubine in the Ottoman palace, it was fear. Not the ordinary kind of fear, but the constant, suffocating awareness that death could come at any moment, without warning, without reason, and without mercy. One wrong word, one glance at the wrong person, one rumor whispered in the Sultan's ear. That was all it took. There were no trials, no defenses, no second chances. The Sultan's word was absolute law. If he ordered your death, you were gone, instantly and often brutally. Imagine living every single day knowing that your survival depended on perfect obedience and absolute silence. You never knew who might be watching you, who might be waiting for you to slip up, or who might whisper your name into the wrong ear. A rival eunuch, a jealous servant, or even one of the palace women could be the end of you. For some, this fear was worse than physical pain. It gnawed at the mind, turning every moment into a gamble, every conversation into a risk. You were never safe, even in your sleep. The execution itself could be swift, a strangling with a bowstring, a sudden beating, or a disappearance in the night. But the true punishment was the waiting, the knowing that death hovered over you at all times like a shadow you could never escape. For the concubines, life inside the palace wasn't just service. It was survival in a place where loyalty meant nothing, and death was always just a breath away. Castration before entry. Of all the brutal realities of life as an Ottoman male concubine, none was more horrifying than this. Castration before even setting foot in the palace. It was the price of entry, the test of survival, and for most, it was a death sentence. The procedure itself was crude, dangerous, and often performed under filthy conditions, with no true understanding of medicine. Infection was almost guaranteed. Blood loss was immense. For every boy who entered the process, many never walked out alive. Their bodies simply couldn't endure it. And yet, those who did survive faced a lifetime marked by scars, not just on their flesh, but deep within their minds. Their manhood was gone, their bodies forever altered, and their future dictated entirely by the Sultan's household. They were no longer who they once were. They had been broken and remade into something new. Tools of the empire, stripped of choice, stripped of identity, and stripped of the very thing that defined them in their old lives. The cruelty didn't end with the act itself. Survivors carried constant reminders, chronic pain, illness, and infertility, as well as the crushing shame of knowing they had been permanently changed against their will. They were living symbols of sacrifice, but not by choice. This was why castration was the most horrifying reality of all. It wasn't just about physical suffering. It was about erasure, the total destruction of body, dignity, and future. To be a eunuch was to live as a shadow of what you once were. And yet, this was the reality for countless boys who became the Sultan's concubines. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. We know these are not easy stories to hear, and we deeply appreciate you joining us on this exploration of history's darker corners. If you found this video insightful, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with others who are interested in untold history, and subscribing to the channel to make sure you don't miss our next chapter. Thank you, and see you in the next episode of Dark Lore.